Coming up, Paul and I discuss unintended consequences, the cost of saying yes, and the role of services even if you only want to have a product. We extend an offer for you to help track security innovation and talk about some of our plans for the future. And Ron Gula joins us to explain the name of his company, love that story, and what areas of security excite him. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back. Business Security Weekly, episode number 82. We're recording it live Monday, April 23rd. I got to tell you what, Mondays, Paul and I were just talking about this. We have so much more energy. We came off a weekend. We're excited to be here, and I hope that translates over into the stuff that you've come to enjoy. We work on focusing on helping to explain the business of security that we might better secure business. That's the whole purpose here. And we want to be your source for trusted insights on leadership and innovation, communication, everything you need to be successful as an enterprise security leader and in the enterprise today, but also if you're an investor or part of the startup grind. I'm still Michael Santarcangelo, your straight talking guide to help you overcome friction, translate your value into understanding. And joining me back from vacation, looking rested and awesome as always, is my friend and yours, Paul Asadoorian.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's good to be here on a Monday. I will echo Michael's thoughts about some of our scheduling changes here and how it's just better for everyone, I think, some of the scheduling changes we made, which is great. I also want to welcome our newer sponsor, Automox. It's very interesting. We have this problem. The problem that they solve, we have it here, right? And as we look to improve our IT operations here at Security Weekly, we very much need a solution like Automox provides. And now we're a small shop, but what's interesting is our systems that run this show, very, very important systems. They need maintenance. And when you're doing 8 shows a week, it's hard to build that maintenance in. So, drawing from the great solutions from Automox and evaluating some others, but, Automox is certainly a great vendor in this space. And looking at how to improve IT operations in a lot of different aspects, borrowing from, the Phoenix Project and the great works that have been carried over from auto manufacturing specifically. It's something that we're working on here. So look for more information on this front. I was just looking at their pricing, and it's pretty aggressive. It's pretty awesome. So I'm really liking Automox, and I'm looking forward to hear more as we bring them on the show.
Yeah, it's funny. When I played, I typed, Paul and I have a way to communicate during the show, and I said, wow, that sounds awesome. I mean, and I'll tell you what went through my head as I was thinking about it. We keep talking about dwell time. We keep talking about how much time it takes to patch. And you and I have had conversations about this throughout the years, but as I was listening to that, and I went, wait, there's a way to automate that? I can, okay, all right. I'm a much bigger fan of this, and I think what we've seen is the whole concept of orchestration and automation is really making dents and benefits. And Ron Gula later is going to join us and talk about that concept of hygiene and some of the stuff that's getting him excited, where he thinks we're going to make a difference. And I tell you, it's good. It's all of this is good stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. Now, Paul, you got a webcast this week, so I just want to remind people real quick. April 25th. That's Wednesday. I don't remember what time it is. What is it? 4? Do you remember, Paul? It's 4?
You try a webcaster at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock.
3
Sam's,
o'clock.
or
The voices in our head. It's
right
3
on top of
o'clock.
that, 3 o'clock.
I don't try to notice, but the reason I say that is because what I've loved about these webcasts is they're conversations. They're real. It's not fluff. It's giving you stuff you want. And this one is with Distill Networks. The year bad bots went mainstream, and you can register still. Go check it out, securityweekly.com/Distill Networks. And as you can see there, it's 1L. It's Distill Networks, 1L. And you can be signed up, and you're going to get it's going to be not only entertaining, right? They call it edutainment. You can be educated and entertained at the same time.
Yeah.
All right,
and so Michael, just a quick note on that. John and I are going to talk about the alphabet soup that is existing today in our industry that talks about protecting your web applications and some of the pros and cons of each of those different types of approaches to securing your web applications. And then Distill is going to talk about the bot problem. So like, even if you think you've got it figured out and you're like, well, I've got all these technologies to protect my web applications. And you're like, what do you mean by a bad bot? You definitely going to want to tune into this, because we're going to talk about the strategy. And then a hole in most people's strategy is like basically determining who's a human being and who's a bot. And if it's a bot, is it bad or is it good? And they have like one of the most innovative, I think the most innovative approach to helping you secure your web applications in that light.
That's awesome. That's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a lot there. You were gracious in saying, even if you think you've got it figured out, yeah, we'll see how that works out. I think you should check everybody out on Wednesday and see how that goes. All right. So the order for today is going to feel a little different. We actually had the chance to pre-record the interview with Ron Gula. So we're going to run that in our third segment. And what we're going to do today is we're going to start with our article discussion. It's been a while since Paul and I got together. This is a chance to just kind of catch up. So just as a reminder, the idea here is what we're looking at are ideas that are either helpful from a leadership perspective, a communications perspective, or an innovation perspective. I typically don't pick things that are relative to security, but the idea then is that these apply. You can be the security leader today. These will apply, even when we're talking about sales. In fact, I would argue more so when we're talking about marketing and sales. If you're in the startup grind or thinking about it, this is good advice for you. Or if you're one of the investors and you're trying to take a look at it, we'll show you some insights into what's happening in the world of security. So this is a chance to kind of talk about it. And the first one I threw in this week, and I'm trying now to be mindful too of what sources I'm pulling from. 4 ways to improve your content marketing. This popped up on Harvard Business Review. It's no secret. I like a lot of their stuff. Paul, here's what I liked about this one. They gave data. Like I'm finding more and more, if you give me actual data, not just blanket assertions, but break down how things are working out, it's really useful. Here's the thing I got most out of this. It's less than 3 minutes to make an impression. In fact, they broke it down. It's 2 minutes, 27 seconds you have typically in order to do that. Now, we've looked at that with video for years. We've looked at that with writing, and we've looked at the length of writing. There's a corollary to this, though, that was just as exciting to me. It's shorter during the week, but longer on the weekend. So what that means is, during the busy day, during the busy week, somebody's going to look at whatever you've got. They're going to give it about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of attention. If they like what they saw, they're going to come back and they're going to spend more time with it on the weekend to try to figure some stuff out. That's when they've got time to get into it and time to read it and everything else. My takeaway on this, I'm curious yours, Paul, but my first takeaway was you can write longer form content still, but it either needs to be paired with shorter form content or it needs to be highly skimmable, where somebody can get to the end of it in 2 minutes or less and go, oh, okay, note, I'm going to come back to this and read it. Now, I don't know about you. I mark a ton of stuff I plan to come back to, and it takes me forever to get to it. So I think the challenge there is, are you relevant enough? Are you exciting enough? Are you urgent enough that they really come back to it on Thursday? A couple other things, and then I'm curious what you kind of pulled out of it. The big one, the other 2 big ones for me, stop worrying about what time and day to send. I still see people trying to it's Tuesdays at 1 o'clock is the absolute best time. And look, I've fallen prey to that myself, and I've seen studies. This new study came out, and they said, yeah, didn't matter. In fact, that's the wrong thing to focus on. Focus on the information that people want. And they said, look, the biggest thing that people read and consume is the case study. It's got an 83% completion rate. That means of all the collateral you're doing. And Paul, in the past when I've done stuff with the channel, I've always said, I've never talked to a channel partner and said, what we need? We need another battle card. I need another sales sheet. Case studies. Why? Why do they matter? Because people want to see what are real people like. And so go back, check out the stuff that we did with Sean D'Souza. Talk about testimonials. Talk about, he's got a guide called The Secret Life of Testimonials. It's not just the small little, I loved them. They were the best ever. It's actually, give me the case study. What was it like? How did it work? And I think that's going to be important. And so it's maybe something that we'll take a closer look at how we can help people do it. But what did you think reading it? Because I mean, we spent a lot of time looking at this.
Well, I think one of the common misconceptions about content marketing and kind of why it gets a bad rap is that many people believe that, oh, if I just generate some content and I push it out there, everything will be great. Like everyone will see my marketing efforts and it'll be great. And it's like, no. And I think this article does a great job of saying it needs to be part of your customer journey, as Michael has articulated in the past. I don't know how much on this show, but certainly in our own meetings, very much harping on the point that you need to take people on a journey. And my kind of take on that is it needs to be part of a campaign, right? When I worked in marketing, sure, we had content that we used in marketing, but we always made sure that it was part of a campaign. And we do that today, you know, on our network, certainly when we help people. It's not just about spray and pray and throwing your content out there. It needs to take people on a journey, and it needs to be in a campaign. And I think the third major point is that you have to have some way to measure it.
Yeah. No, and that's why I like things like this, right? They come out and they show us what that takes to look like. Somewhere in the course of my day, and I didn't throw it into the notes, it was probably in this particular article. You know, you talked about, a lot of people say, well, if I just write it, if I just create it, people will show. Not necessarily. And to your last point, then, measuring it. Do you know? We ask this of a lot of the partners of our program. Do you know what converts? Do you know what moves somebody from that's neat to, whoa, I think I need that? And what's fascinating is when you really get into it and study it, it turns out that usually a very small percentage, very small portion of content does the biggest conversions.
Right.
So then the question is, why? What did you go figure out? The other thing, of course, is that people are on a parallel track now. So I've never been a fan of the funnel concept. You know, I've talked about that. You know, it says like you get all the leads up top and then it keeps squeezing down till they're actually a customer. And wow, it's really exciting. I see it much more as a journey. And what's cool about that is there's no two single paths are the same. Depending on what they know, where they're at in their own context and reality, that kind of brings it all forward. By being able to think differently about how you're presenting and sharing information, you kind of meet people where they're at. And so anyway, that's the stuff I like. Let's talk about unintended consequences. I love this concept. I've always loved this concept. And this is on Shane Parrish's Farnham Street blog. And if you don't read that or get that, it's a great investment. He puts so much effort into it, and you can tell. And you know, people think I'm reading a lot, and Shane is the kind of person. Shane and Ryan Holiday both make me look like I don't even know how to read. So here's the idea: we have these things called unintended consequences, and this is something, Paul, I figured out when I wrote Into the Breach. I've got a whole section on the human paradox, and then I built the model around it. I should probably dust it off and maybe push it back out there. But the idea was that, you know, we've got actions or decisions that we make, and then we have consequences. But what matters is whether it was intentional or unintentional. And you can have something that's unintentional, but it's actually good, like the way we discovered penicillin, for example. And of course, where we tend to focus on security is all the things that are unintended, and they tend to be bad and sometimes catastrophic. But the reality is, it's okay. So what this article does, and it's a pretty lengthy article, completely worth it, is that if you think, so this typically comes from two things. Either it's more complex than it actually is, like we overthink it, or the other option is we didn't anticipate it. Like nobody ever said what could go wrong. It was always what could go right. And we've talked about this. Some companies now do what they call a pre-mortem before they go to launch, before they walk in, they go, okay, everybody, it failed. Why? What went wrong? This is like a week out, a month out. And the idea is you kind of want to just stop and say, okay, but what's the range of possible, even if it's not what's desired or what we like? And the idea is to kind of think that through. The one I wanted to point out, and I want to get your take on it, is this idea of the Cobra effect. I've heard a story. There was other ones where it's actually been listed for bugs, household bugs and stuff. But the Cobra effect basically said the government said, hey, anybody who brings us a dead cobra, there's a reward for that. So what did people do, Paul?
They killed cobras.
Yeah, and what else did they do?
Brought them to the government after they killed them.
They bred cobras.
Oh.
Because I can get money by bringing you a cobra. So what's better than just bringing you a dead cobra I found? Having a whole bunch of cobras that I can bring to you every time I need money. So what happens when the government turned off the spigot and stopped paying for dead cobras? People didn't need their cobras anymore. So what did they do with them?
Released them into the wild.
Released them. Guess what we had? More cobras. And so and there was the same kind of a concept around flies and dead flies, and there was a a home for boys, and they basically give you a nickel for every dead fly you bring us because they had a fly problem. Well, now the kids were figuring out all these different ways to trap and kill flies from all these different places to try to maximize the return on that. And so, I always look at it in our industry and say, are bug bounties that? Like, are bug bounties helping us or not? And this is not, I don't have a preconceived notion to it. My thought process is always, what's the expected, right? What do we anticipate when a company enters into a bug bounty, or if you're a hunter and you're entering into the other side of that equation and you're taking part in this larger call for a testing process to discover problems? Okay, what's our expected outcome? What's the actual outcome? And what's the marketplace shaping up to be? And where's that going? And how's that looking? I always think it's kind of fun to take a look at that because, like I said, we always look at the negative of unintended consequences, and they can be positive. And then sometimes we don't think about them. Right. And that's usually when they bite us.
Well, and I think it's very similar to threat modeling too, right? Trying to understand what the unintended consequences are before they happen is very much threat modeling. I think that kind of shapes into how we view the operations of our systems today. I think Netflix was certainly, and Amazon both were pioneers in that, to basically have the unintended consequence happen and see how your team and your processes react, and then adjusting moving forward. I think that's a super critical part of your IT operations, software development, both today.
And we're seeing a lot more. Geez, it's great. So we said Mondays. We're
right.
Apparently not more coherent, just more excited about it all. I'm seeing a lot of trends, Paul, where people in the corporate world are exactly pushing for that. What we're seeing now, too, is if you want your operations to be more resilient and more agile, then you need this, and you also need this, and you also need this. And here's how you make that shift culturally. And we're seeing now more solutions that support it and ease it. And we're seeing insecurity a lot. So I think it's going to keep happening, and it's good. I just think it's a fun conversation to have with people, too. All right. Paul, I know this happens to you all the time. Hey, do you just got 20 minutes? Can you give me 20 minutes of time? And there's a cost to this. We've talked about this before. We've talked about polite ways to say no, why you should say no. And so Ryan Holiday went at it from a very personal, slightly different way to say, here's what it costs to say yes. And what he talked about was that he's got like a calendar, I think he actually wrote anorexia. But like his point was, I don't like to see meetings all over the place. Like it really knocks him off his game. And we talked about we're managers versus makers. I've brought up before Deep Work by Cal Newport, and I'm actually right now putting together some stuff for like a book club for some of the things that we're taking a look at here, and I'm studying some different models on it. This book is and somewhere in the next year or so going to make its way into there. The idea is that if you're a maker, you need space. You need deep, uninterrupted time to just go deep or wide or wherever. But knowing you've got meetings and stuff is kind of frustrating. And I'm finding myself the same situation. For me, what I'm finding now is like my Mondays are my production days, and my Fridays are what I call my chaos days. So by moving Business Security Weekly to Monday, this has been great for me personally, because now I've got one day a week where I'm really intensely, deeply focused on production, making sure that this show is ready, making sure we're connected with everything, any of the writing that needs to get done, anything. It's all right there on Monday. It's a good way to start the week. We do this show, feels good, still got time to take calls, but I'm not taking any calls until after this program. So I've got that time allocated. When my energy is high, my focus is good, we're putting our most important stuff forward. My Fridays, then, I actually also don't schedule time. Now, I've taken calls on Fridays, but the ideas on Fridays are I've got time to just catch up, to be deep, to work where I need to go, ramble, or frankly, if I'm fried, it gets to be noon, and I call it for an early weekend. And he's trying to do the same thing here. So his point was, it's a compliment. Like people reaching out to you, he was like, when you start out and nobody knows you, nobody wants your time. It's when you've had some level of success that people reach out that they want your time. He's like, but that doesn't mean that you should say yes. And I wanted to point out, because I've started to see this now with a lot of security leaders, and I love the sentiment underneath it. We've been the party of no for so long. No, you can't do that. No, let me tell you what's wrong. Let me tell you what's wrong with that. No, let me stop that. Wait. A lot of folks are going, okay, it doesn't work. I get that. We need to be collaborative. We need what we talked about, influence without authority. We need to go do all these different things. So every time somebody asks, I say yes. And that's where we end up with 30 priorities. I mean, I'm sorry, folks. I know you think you're the exception. You're not. You cannot be successful with 30 priorities. I'm not even convinced anymore you can be successful with 5. I'm really getting down to it's 3. got to have 3 really good things that you execute on, and maybe then completely offload so you can pick up 3 new things next year. You can argue me you can do more or less, but the idea here is if you say yes to something, then you had to say no to something else, even if you didn't intend to, right? It's like Russia's free will. You can choose not to decide, but then you've still made a choice.
Right.
Yeah, same thing here. And then he goes on, and I've seen this for years, right? It's 24 hours a day in a period. 24 hours in a day, period. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're in tech, not in tech, have tech, don't have tech, like it, don't like it. It's 24 hours on a day.
I think one thing that Ryan kind of hints on in this article, Michael, is, and John Willis talks about it in Beyond the Phoenix Project as well, and it's something I was aware of early in my career, and I arguably at different points have done maybe a better job than others at different points, but that is, and this very much in software development is true, and even IT, every interruption is sometimes 2 to 3 times longer than the actual interruption. In other words, if you're in the middle of writing some code and someone comes in to ask you a question and you stop what you're doing, you answer that person's question for 5 minutes. When you go back and start digging into your code, it takes sometimes 15 minutes to like get back to where you were before. That can be a tough thing for folks to really truly understand if you haven't experienced it yourself. But in anything that you're doing, that interruption is much more costly in terms of time than you imagine. So structuring your meetings so that they happen back to back in a certain portion of the day so that you have the rest of the day to then go focus is hugely important. Something that I think we need to do a better job of in general on a lot of different fronts because that interruption is so expensive.
You're right. And it's funny how we don't think about that. Like we get so used to the adrenaline or the interrupt that we've never sat down and said, wait, when I get interrupted from this, something that should have taken me 15 minutes now takes 2 hours.
Yep.
Why? And by the way, the penalty for, it's called task switching, has an attention residue to it. So the first time isn't as bad as the 3rd or 4th or 5th time in your day.
Oh,
and if you find that you're getting interrupted as the day goes on,
Yeah.
you'll be shot by 3 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people right now nodding their heads going, yeah, it's because there's only so much we can do. I've been experimenting with different ways to structure. And like I said, right now I'm down to the structuring on the wings, but also, when the kids are at school and I block off some time and I sit and I write, oddly productive.
Mm-hmm.
But like trying to write in the evening when they're all trying to do homework, it's never worked for me. Same concept. All right, Tomas Tunks makes a return back to our blog. I've got to figure out how to get him on our show. So he did this article on why your sales team loses deals. And he went and they looked at, they had all sorts of data compiled, they analyzed it all. And so this excludes competition. So it wasn't, I lost the deal because a competitor beat us out for whatever reason. So let's take that off. 48% of the people lacked the budget to buy. And he's already got a conclusion on this, but I'm going to go ahead and say, you should have known that up front.
Yep.
You should have known up front. 38% had no urgency to buy. I'm going to go ahead and say you probably should have known that up front, if not very early in the process. And 13% lacked authority. I would like to argue that that's a surprise, except for I've seen enough places where you can flat out ask if they've got authority, and they will flat out tell you that they do, and then you get there and they totally don't. So it's an interesting thing. So here's his takeaway from it. You need to know the budget to buyer and the urgency. In fact, what I really liked about this, and it's worth this alone, he lists out 6 basic sales methodologies. In fact, he pulled up a new one in this one that I hadn't seen before. But there's one called BANT, and there's anyway, he's got 6 of them that he lays out, and it's all about, right, do you have budget? Do you have urgency? Do you have the need, right? The need for it? Are you the person who can do it? Right? The authority. I think BANT is budget, authority, need, and timeline. Like, do they have a clear timeline to act?
Right.
His point here is, I don't actually care what you use, but are you qualifying these deals properly? And the reason is interesting. And this to me has become the sorting question, Paul. When you and I talk to sales folks, especially when we get the chance to walk the show floor together, you'll always hear me ask this question, right? Like, what leads do you go after and what do you cut? And you watch my reaction when they go, oh, well, I'm looking for this, or this. Those I know we can progress. Versus the person who says, oh, well, everybody's a lead. No, guys, not everybody's a lead. They might, right? And so they talk about this a lot in different places, right? And it took me a while to figure this out. And I think it was Anthony Iannarillo who helped me finally get it. You've got prospects and you've got leads, and they're not the same, right? So leads are basically suspects. A lead means, right, you just went to a show, they scanned your badge, now they've got your email address, and they're going to send something to you. They don't know anything about you. You're not qualified in any way. I don't really know much about you. When I move you from I don't know much about you to now I know more about you, you could become a prospect if the problem that you're trying to solve matches the problem that I'm able to solve. Could be plenty of caveats around it, but at that highest level, that's a prospect. That said, a prospect may not have budget, may not have authority, may not have that urgency or that need, or have any ability to affect a timeline to move forward. When they have that, that's an opportunity. That's the difference between prospects and opportunities. Prospects are qualified to at least experience the problem that you solve, whereas an opportunity is somebody who experiences it, is aware of it, has the budget, the authority, the need, and the ability to move it forward on schedule. Oh,
yeah, I think prospects look good on paper, right? It's kind of a good way to think of it, right? Yeah, and I mean, we do that in our own sales process, right? We think on paper, this is a great prospect. But I think this article is spot on, dude, with when they talk about lacking budget, urgency, and authority. Those are things that are very difficult to discover on paper, right? I mean, because you look at a company's revenue, or look at, if it's a consumer-based company, the target profile you're going after, the average income, that doesn't necessarily translate to budget. Like, it just doesn't. And that's something you only figure out when you're in the process of converting them basically from a prospect to an opportunity, is basically qualifying those things like budget, like urgency. Now, the hard part is sales training traditionally teaches you, like, you never ask what their budget is. And you never lead in with your lowest cost offering either, right? I mean, so there's some things in there, but I think this article
so let's flip that around. That's a perfect segue, Paul. So let's look at this. Does this help you then if you're an enterprise person, right? And I don't mean like, oh, now I know their tricks. What if there weren't any tricks? What if you knew if or what kind of budget you did or didn't have available to you? Because keep in mind, right, if you're an enterprise security leader today, somebody desperate to connect with you, if you were upfront with them and said, look, here's the urgency, right? Think value prop scorecard for a second. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's the value I'm looking to get to solve that problem. And here's what can or can't impact, right? Here's what'll make or break the deal for me. If you then said to them, okay, I can do that, we might be talking like 6 figures, and they go, cool, I got a budget of 150. That's it. Listen, if you're a vendor, that's not a signal for I must inflate to 150. That means, okay, they might be a serious person for you.
Right.
And then on the security leadership side, don't be afraid to tell them what your budget is. Look, if you feel like they're running up the numbers just to get your total budget, kick them out the door. We'll show you how to do that. Don't waste your time on them. But if you want to get this, then you need to understand too, what's the real urgency? Is this a top 3 priority for you? And again, you're gonna keep hearing me say this because I got a decade of experience with this. Well, Michael, we got 20 priority. No, you don't. You don't. It's just simply impossible. What are your top 3? What are the top 3 things that you need to get done? But if you've got something that you need to get done and they're able to do it for you, I don't know. I think we can have better discourse around these types of things. And that's why this stuff matters for me too. I mean, if you've got to try to sell your security program and this person absolutely hates you because you bought something they were trying to, don't waste your time on it. You're not going to convert them. Go figure out the people that are able to influence your deal, that are excited about the potential to work with you, that see it. Go spend the time on them. Those are the ones that are going to support you. You can get the budget you want and everything else.
Well, in budgets, just one last point on that. Budget's kind of a funny thing too, especially when we talk about selling security products. You may have a security product that might overextend what the client has claimed as their budget, but you're going to save them money in other things. Maybe it allows your team to work more efficiently, and it allows you to not have to renew the subscriptions to like 2 or 3 other vendors, or you're not paying as much maintenance to one vendor, right? So budget's a very funny thing. It can fluctuate based on the solution that you're offering. And the best solutions out there, the ones that are the no-brainer, as we say, right? Or go, well, yeah, it's not 150, it's 175, but I'm going to save you 50 based on the metrics I can show, and you're going to dump this other vendor, and your team's going to be 10% more efficient or whatever, right?
Yeah, and by the way, if I can show you 10% more efficient, that's worth it. Which then means, as a vendor, you need to be willing to have that conversation and confident in the value that you can deliver.
Yes.
And as a security leader, you need to be willing to say, okay, well, I can go back and I can ask for more money. Because
right.
Newsflash, you can totally go back and ask, if you've been in security and in a leadership position longer than 3 years, I guarantee you at some point somebody's had to come and have the tough conversation with you about how all budgets are being cut by 10%, or all hires are frozen, or all whatevers are done. Wait, so somebody else unilaterally made a decision that totally impacted you. That means you can unilaterally go beg for more money, or let's be better, make the case for a proper investment that increases value and benefits multiple people at the same time. And P.S., it's $25K more than I put in the budget line for it when I didn't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Every CIO, CEO, CFO, or executive I've talked to has always told me I would always prefer somebody come and make the case. And I've even said, what if they just spent the $150K and now they got a better solution? Bring it to me, Michael. That's my job. Mm-hmm. Make the case. Make me make the hard decision.
The key word there being value.
Yeah.
And that's really the crux of that conversation. You got to be able to show that value. And if you can, the budgets, I mean, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it's less of a factor if you can show that value.
In fact, if you show that value and you follow, so I'm going to promise you right now, I'm going to jump for a second. A lot of you have written in recently about the value prop scorecard stuff. You've had good questions on problem and asked for examples, good questions on value, good questions on impact. We're going to have a conversation in the next segment around this. And I can tell you right now, we are going to put together some segments that not only answer the questions, but demonstrate that and show you what that looks like. So stick with us, but that's the same thing here. I think this is connected to it, Paul. So, and this is fun. This is TechCrunch. It actually came across, I don't know, last couple of days. The case for boosting enterprise software startups with services. So here's the way this kind of works, and I think it fits into what we're just talking about here. If you're looking at deals, you're trying to look at how this type of stuff works. I'm going to start on the enterprise side for a second and then show you why this matters. You're already pedal down. You're pushing as hard as you possibly can. Maybe you got the friction, maybe you don't. By the way, if you think you don't, it just means you don't know where it is yet and you haven't found it. So what happens then is you come along, you see this technology, go, oh, that'd be cool. If you've got some experience, you go, wait, that's going to be cool. How am I going to implement that? How long is it going to take to integrate that? What are the surprises I don't know about? And how do I really get the value that they're asking me for out of it? If you're an enterprise, that means for you, it might be good, right? So OpEx versus CapEx. OpEx is your operating expenditures. CapEx is your capital expenditures. Typically, this would be like if you look at a building, it's the cost of building the building versus cleaning and maintaining the building. When we look at it for security, it's the difference between buying hardware and software, although software can kind of go either direction depending on how you classify it, and getting help for it. And so the argument here is a lot of times you can de-risk your investment in any sort of solution, certainly a startup solution, by bundling some services with it. Now, what we talk a lot about here on innovation is, well, but hold on, if you're trying to run a business today, it doesn't scale too well. Now, I've got a background in consulting. Consulting, first of all, scales pretty well. And if you're defined enough, if you're niche enough, right? If you're one of the large ones like Accenture that we worked with a little bit last year or such, you command a premium for a lot of reasons, not the least of which are some of the great things that they talked about in terms of their investment in innovation and training and mentorship and everything else. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot in my time with what was Andersen Consulting, Accenture, and it was great. But traditionally, if what you're trying to do is start a product, then offering services around that product often becomes a distraction. You don't make as much money. You don't scale as well. It's not really what your intention and your purpose was. So a lot of people say, nope, absolutely don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And the argument here is, actually, you should think about it. And the simplest reason, and they list, like they really break down all sorts of stuff. But here's what I thought mattered, especially when it came to security. You're trying to do something that's complex, and you're trying to put it in. Now, remember, we just talked about complexity and the biases that we have for complexity that lead to unintended and unanticipated consequences. What I found, and we've talked to a couple companies that have done this, that they kind of let out with, well, we've got a product, but I'm not exactly sure how to make it work that way. Here, I'll sell you some services. And as the services engagement started figuring that out, they talked to the developers who built different stuff into the platform, who then were able to sell it. And then, a couple years later, they say, hey, look, our 8.0 release, it can do this for you. You don't have to pay for our services anymore. The argument here, and the risk is, it can help you better figure out your product market fit. It can better help you figure out perhaps even your MVP. And it means that people are spending money on it. It's a way to de-risk it, to get in there, to get the experience to it. I'm going to just sum up all of their pros and cons to it and say, here's the caveat, or here's the what you need to think about doing it. How do you do it in a way that benefits your best customers and pulls them into that ability to define the pathway and figure out all the implementation and improve your product, but doesn't become the sole source of revenue. Like you don't want it to be the recurring number. You want the recurring number to be the product and the subscriptions and everything else. This is the startup. And then eventually, I would either say you have a small team that handles it or you push it off to partners. Now, Paul, I got to think about this. You and I have asked a lot of people in the product development side, like how do you know what features to add or not to add, and how do you know when to do it? And I think this is a way to do that. It's keeping you engaged with your partners, with your trusted clients and stuff. But I've been thinking a lot about Sean D'Souza and the idea of the target profile. And if you go back and you check out that interview, he really breaks into, you're talking about a person, not a composite, which he calls a Franken profile. You want a person and to do an interview with that person, understand it. And I actually think that's the secret. I think that if you're in product management today or the content marketing or anything else, don't worry about the persona so much as go find whoever's closest to your ideal client and really get to understand them and their particular needs. The ones that are most closely aligned to the ideal client are the ones I put services on, because chances are, working with 2, 3, 4, 5 of those folks, that's going to get you the insight that you need in order to grow your business. I think that's where they all start to come together.
And we've covered so many different companies, Michael, that are either no services, like you can't call anyone at Google. Well,
right.
You could try, right? But, that's a very hands-off model all the way to, you mentioned Accenture, which is all about consulting, but there's everyone else in between. And it's not a black and white issue, right? I've seen services companies that have spun up products, and I've seen product companies that have offered services, and sometimes it's been successful, sometimes not. And I think that as a business owner or business leader or a consultant, right, you need to be able to navigate those waters. And I think everything Michael just covered is really a lot of the different variables you have to work with. And I don't believe it's a black and white kind of issue, right? It's not like you have to either be products or services. No, there are some models that could work for you in either direction. And again, I've 14 years for our 14th year covering this industry, right? I've seen a lot of companies make those decisions for good, bad, or indifferent. And you got to read that article and listen to what Michael is talking about with respect to this article to really make that decision. And the journey and the path and that decision is going to be different for everyone. And so, hopefully it works out for your organization, whatever you choose. But I think the important point here is don't discount it in either direction. Maybe you need to dump your services. There are companies that did that just recently. I hope it works out for them. There are other companies that are spinning up services. Hope that works out too, right? And I've seen it go, all kinds of different directions. So there's no real solid, concrete answer. It's different for everyone.
I like that. So if you're watching, we're about to take a quick break, but write to us. Let us know who you think's getting the balance right, or if you think somebody's maybe making a mistake. We're not going to bash them on this program, but I'd at least like to know, and we could track it and figure it out. With that, when we take our break, you can go to securityweekly.com. You can check out all the shows we've got. This is just one of many. Something for everybody, maybe everything for someone. I don't know how that would work out, but we got lots of options. securityweekly.com. Check us out. You can send us feedback. Let us know what you think. And when we come back, we talk about what the quiet week of innovations meant for us in terms of reflection with an invitation for you.